have a finger up. Okay. Hello. Good morning. I used to feel that way when I got up, and I don't know if you saw like the fear in my eyes. I used to be so passive growing up. My nickname was Passive. My friends would say, "So Henry, what do you think?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. What do you think?" Right? And it was literally caging. And I travel the world now, and I see that there's like this epidemic, and it's fear. And it shows up in so many ways, and if you relate to any of it, I'm sure you relate to a lot of it. It's insecurity, lack of self-love, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of not being enough, fear of not being loved or lovable, right? And I go around and I thought about my teenage years. When I was a teenager, I was so afraid, and fear is caging. It's like enslaving, right? And so there was one moment where I was just like, there's got to be a way out of this. There's got to be, like, I didn't like feeling caged. I don't ever want to feel like something holds you back or I'm not liberated to be the best version of myself. So my cousin put this book in front of me, and I read the book, and funny enough, it was a Dr. Phil book, right? I'm a teenager reading Dr. Phil. But it had questions in the back of it, and I was reading the questions, and something sparked, and I realized I could change. Like, I have the opportunity to become whoever I want to become. The past does not equal my future unless I want it to be. So I got obsessed. Like, I started reading a ton of books. I started reading every book I could. Everybody that walked by that was confident, I would walk by and say, excuse me, can I ask you some questions? Why are you confident? And they're like, what are you doing? And I would email random people that were on like Forbes lists or people that I saw as successful at the time, and I would just pick their brain and ask questions because I wanted to be free, because I wanted to be the best version of myself. And one day I had this book in front of me, and I read this story about Michael Jordan, the basketball player. And I don't know if you know the story, but his father pulled over because he was really tired. And his father pulled over, and someone attempted to rob him and murdered him the week of the NBA Finals. And I was reading it, and of course you're engaged in the story like, oh my gosh. And I'm reading it, and Michael Jordan made a statement that said, at that moment I realized I had a choice. I could be the owner or I could play the victim. And something clicked in my head, and I said, oh my gosh, choice. The power of choice. The power of choice is one of the greatest gifts we have in this life, and yet it's so easy to give it up to fear, to insecurity. And to me, that moment, I made the greatest decision in my life, the decision to be the decider of my life. Meaning no matter what, I'm going to be liberated. I'm going to choose my life. You know, and we all hear the phrase, so choice is a big one, and truth, because we all know the phrase, the truth will set you free, right? But the truth with love will set you free. Because a lot of us like, yeah, I'm just being real. I just stink at this, and I'm not good at this, and I'm not good at that, and we beat ourselves up. Is that really going to help us be free? Absolutely not. So love and truth combined is what liberates us, right? And it's getting to the truth of everything in our lives, the truth of who I really am, the truth that I am a chooser in my life, right? And not that sometimes the choices aren't necessarily easy. You know, the situation a few years back, I remember early on, I said, I have to start making decisions in advance. Like deciding how I'm showing up today, deciding that I'm not just going to be reactive, because the word react means reacting how things have always been. It's just a cycle, and I don't want to live a cycle. I'm here to grow and to elevate and to be, right? And sometimes the choices aren't easy. You know, a few years back, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and at that moment, you know, a few years before that, my father had passed away, and my family just crumbled for a while. But this time, when I was in the hospital, and the doctor pulls me aside and says, can I speak to you in my office? It's like the movies, right? And you're like, okay. He's like, your mother has cancer. If you didn't bring her in today, she would have died. And at that moment, I was like, choice. I have to choose how I'm showing up today. I have to choose how going forward. So I called my sister. I'm like, hey, you have to come to the hospital. I looked at her. I said, look, before we go in there, we have to decide we're showing up for Mom every single day, no matter what happens. We can't control the circumstance, but we can choose who we become from it and how we show up. So we decided in advance, and even though she went down to 70 pounds and we're changing my mother's diapers, and she had passed away while I'm holding her hand, I don't ever regret the choice that I made in advance, because had I not been deliberate, my past programming would have spun me down and I wouldn't have been able to be present for her. I'm not saying it wasn't easy. I'm not saying I didn't drive around town crying to James Bay, right, all the time. I don't know why James Bay was a romantic song. I have no idea why. But it was that moment where I realized choice and the truth. What can I change and what can't I change, right? Fear is just an imagined future. I'm imagining something so vividly, emotionally imagining something, that it's causing my physiology to change, my thoughts to change, my focus to change. But if I can use my imagination and my creativity to cause that much cage enslaving fear, can I use the same imagination to create liberation? Can I use deliberate choice every day to step into it? So I thought of this and I created something, I call it Vizing, V-I-Z. V is to, like every morning I'll wake up and I'll think of my day and I'll say, okay, I'm deciding today how I'm showing up. I'm not living on default mode, I'm not gonna be a puppet, I'm not gonna sleepwalk through life. So I'll look at my day and I'll say, V, okay, visualize exactly what I'm gonna do today, exactly how I wanna show up. And it's not gonna be the same, right? So if I show up to my job or an office or whatever I'm doing, I'm gonna walk in with determination to go in and crush it and do what I'm gonna do. But if I'm gonna go and be romantic with, I don't have a significant other yet, but when I am, I'm not gonna walk in with the same determination that I do that. I'm gonna show up differently. So I'll see it, I'll visualize it, it's for V. And then our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's imagined and what's real. How many of you have been really, really angry with somebody? Like your body is tensed up, your thoughts are flowing, your focus is, I can't believe they did that to me. Everything is showing up in your body only to find out they didn't do it. Has that ever happened to anybody? Yeah, everybody's smiling, someone's like, oh yeah, okay. So, but your body reacted, your thoughts reacted, your focus reacted, your whole life reacted, how you treated other people. It all reacted because of something that was created that wasn't even true, but your subconscious mind thought it was true, so everything was reactive accordingly. So we could use that same mechanism to liberate ourselves and to show up empowered in our lives, right? So when it's whatever you emotionally integrate is what really gets embodied into your nervous system. So the V is when you visualize it, I is to integrate emotion into it. When we emotionalize something, it really gets into our nervous systems. People that are afraid of clowns or afraid of anything in that sense, we had an instance in our lives that was really emotional, something really impactful. We were scared. And then at that moment, our minds saw an image to it. So now we associate that fear to that image. So every time we see that image, we get triggered, right? So the goal is to re-trigger and rewire our mindset. So whenever you emotionalize something, the more emotion you can give something, the stronger it can embody into your nervous system. And then Z, I say zoom. We zoom into it, and I see myself doing it. And literally, that practice every single day has rewired my brain. I used to be so passive, I would be freaked out standing up here. But I'm here, and I still have a long way to go, and it wasn't the easiest path, and I got obsessed for the past 20 years studying every book, every person, every seminar I can go to, only to realize that our brain we could rewire our brain. That where you are now doesn't mean that's where you're always going to be, and fear does not have to dictate your life, because fear is a terrible dictator. It's a great counselor, but it's a terrible dictator. And I always say emotions are indicators. So whenever I feel something, whenever I feel fear, I don't get upset, I don't resist it, I don't do anything. I say, okay, what's showing up? It's indicating my focus is off, my self-talk is off, my physiology is off. Something is going on in here I need to be aware of. I don't resist it because it is what it is. And some fear is good, right? I'm not going to jump in front of a car. I'm afraid to do that. But most fear doesn't serve us. What would happen in your life? What would you accomplish in your life? How would you impact the world if you showed up with no fear? If you showed up free and showed up fully shining? And that's the problem in the world. Is every one of you has gifts, talents, strengths, experiences that you can go give to the world. But we show up at 80% or 50% sometimes because we're worried what other people think. But realizing that we're not giving our gift to the world because we're afraid, because we're caged. But it's time to be free and no longer protect anything that doesn't serve us. If it doesn't serve you, don't protect it. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve anybody else. So I said enough is enough. I will no longer protect that. And even though sometimes I'll have to be courageous, because courage becomes confidence. I'm not saying I don't feel fear, but I feel the fear. I'll go through my process, and I'll show up knowing when I show up when it's hard, that's when I'm really going to rewire my brain. But I show up in the most healthy way, right? It's the resistance that helps me grow. It's resistance in life that helps me grow. And if we live our life caged in fear, then we're not going to fulfill our destiny. Or it's going to take us a much longer time. And so, what is the flavor of fear that shows up most in your life? And I will tell you this, that it's probably a trigger from something between the ages of 0 and 7. Because most of our beliefs happen that way. And some of my clients, some people that work with me, there was one lady that came up to me, she said, I'm always afraid of failing. I'm so afraid of it. And everything I do, I feel like a failure. And she was pretty successful, like in other people's eyes, like successful, right? She's like, I always feel like a failure. So I took her through this process, and we went back to the very first time she formulated that belief. She was 4 years old. Her father grabbed her by the arm and moved her and said, you failed me. So she lived 36 more years of her life feeling like a failure because of one thing that happened in the past. So it's not even you. You are the chooser. You are the decider. When we recognize who we really are, we recognize that I have this power of choice. Right now, one decision can change everything. Literally, you're watching this on TV, on your computer, sitting in the audience. One decision you make can and will change everything if we're willing to decide. If we're willing to shine and be who we are, and despite having fear, we show up with courage and understanding there are tools that we can overcome our fears with and really step into who we are. We weren't born to live caged. We weren't born to live enslaved. We were born to be free. And each person has a gift. So no more. And just living life full out. And the big question for me that really, really wakes me up is when I was sitting there with my mom and watching her on her bed and sitting in the hospital for 12 hours saying, one day that's going to be me. And what do I want to say when that's my time? I want to say I gave it all and put it all on the table. And even if I stunk at it, I gave it everything I had. And between where I am now and where I want to go, I understand that there's going to be fear, there's going to be discomfort. But I can frame it to where I know I'm going to go through that path. And when I get through it, I'm going to be better, stronger, wiser, and I can serve everybody much better for it. So let's own our strengths. Let's own our gifts. Let's own our talents. So when we look back at our lives, we can honestly say, I put it all on the table. I owned it, and I lived free, and I lived courageously. So what is your gift that you're going to give the world? So let's step out in love. There's one life. Let's live it up. Thank you so much.